This picture is of the largest living organism in the world. It's a giant redwood in California. It's 380 feet tall, 23 feet in diameter, and it has over 250 unique symbiotic plants and animals that are living in its canopies. I don't know if you were able to count, but there's 4 people in that. We'll go from the bottom one more time. There's one there, and as you keep going up, you'll see there's another one coming up there. And then 2 at the top. And the fellow at the top looks like he's a lot closer in the foreground because he is. He's on a branch that projects off of the tree stem about 60 feet. It's been said that trees are the lungs of the planet, and it's true. They filter carbon dioxide out of the air and they give off oxygen. And one average sized tree produces approximately the same amount of oxygen as one human being needs in a day. It's a really convenient ratio, isn't it? 1 to 1. Is it any wonder wood feels so good? It connects us to nature. When we touch it, we see it, we smell it, or we taste it, we feel connected to our planet. There's no greater connection between human beings than sitting around a wood fire. In fact, learning to burn wood is how we humans became the top dog on the planet. Once we learned how to make fire, we could cook our food. It took us a lot less time to be able to have the nutrition that we needed in order to be able to succeed as the top dog. The candy that you're now enjoying is made from this drop of maple sap. Our delicious seasonal delicacy. It's a rite of spring in Canada and in the northern United States. It takes 40 liters of this sap in order to be able to make 1 liter of maple syrup. Enjoy this gift from Mother Nature. Wood is made up of roughly 50% carbon, 42% oxygen, 6% hydrogen, and 2% other elements. It is made by the leaves or the needles on the trees, converting sunlight to sugar, starch, and other nutrients, which in turn are the building blocks to construct wood cells. Where a tree grows and how much sunlight it receives has a direct correlation to how much wood it can produce. Longer growing seasons with trees spaced farther apart, like in a plantation, will yield maximum wood production. Shorter growing seasons in an old growth forest or a climax forest produce less wood in the same time. They're both excellent sources for wood, but one, climax forests, must be selectively harvested and are an ecosystem where clear cutting a crop is the right proposition if you've got a plantation. On the slide behind me here, you'll see the difference between old growth forest and plantation grown. And so on the left side, you see the growth rings. You've got approximately 20 growth rings for a ½ an inch of wood. And on the right side, you've got approximately 2 growth rings for ½ an inch of wood. Obviously, the one on the right was engineered for wood production. The one on the left was part of an old growth climax forest. The one on the left's timber is of much higher quality than the one on the right. But since we have to have this balance between old growth forest and plantation, they're both good places to find wood fiber. The truth is, you just have to be careful when you're harvesting in an old growth forest. Trees are considered renewable because they can be replaced in a reasonable length of time, in as short as 40 years in some plantations. Comparing it with concrete and steel, which are 2 of the other commonly used building blocks, it has the least amount of embodied energy. Wood, surprisingly today, comes from many different sources. We spoke earlier about selective cutting, so when you're in a forest, you want to make sure that the trees that you're taking down have been marked by a registered professional forester, so that what remains in the forest is still an intact ecosystem. Clear cutting generally wipes a forest out, and if you're wiping a forest out, you've removed the ecosystem from the planet, and you probably caused erosion and some other serious problems as well. The city of Toronto, where I live, cuts down approximately 80,000 trees a year. Recently, we've had an invasion of an emerald ash borer, an insect, and we've cut down about 3 times that many trees in each of the last 4 years. So the city allows anyone to utilize these trees. Artisans, sawmills, flooring plants have been ramping up to try to take advantage of this free wood. Other places that we find wood today are in urban buildings when they're being torn down. Most of this wood is old growth timber. These buildings sometimes are 100 years plus old, so the timber that went into them are at least 100, 150 years old. And so that stable, old growth material that we saw in slides earlier is what they're harvesting out of these buildings, making it a valuable resource to take the time to slowly demolish the building and salvage the timber from them. Changing rural lifestyles, people migrating into the cities have caused barns to become into disuse in Canada and North America generally. All the woods that were built with these barns are old growth timbers and boards, and they have a very high value. So they've recently started in the last 15 years to salvage these barns, and the wood that's coming out of them has been used in all kinds of different furniture projects and flooring projects, which you'll see in a minute. Rivers were the highways to the sawmills of yesteryear, and roughly 5% of every log drive in North America sank to the bottom. These valuable timbers were denser and heavier than all the other timbers that were in the log drive, and they make them extremely valuable in today's marketplace. And so, of course, there are people there now side scanning SOMAR, finding the wood, and then salvaging it. And it's been used for some of the best woodworking projects around the world. Swamps are another place where machinery until now wasn't available to make it viable to go into these wet and sometimes treacherous places. But often the timber is old growth, and the prescription is clear-cutting everything in its path. So this is not a sound environmental practice. Basically, you're destroying the habitat. The water warms up. If there were any fish or other animals in that habitat, the habitat is completely destroyed. So not a sustainable practice, and one that we don't condone. This is a really interesting image. This is a tool called a sawfish, and there's a barge up above it. These sawfish get put into reservoirs around the world where forests have been flooded as many as 100 years ago. These forests were old growth, and these sawfish go down with cameras and lights and a hydraulic saw on them, and they find the trees that they want. They attach an airbag to them, they pump oxygen into the airbag, then they cut the tree, and the tree rises to the surface. Again, old growth trees. Canadian technology. Wood has been used in a number of different areas around construction projects these days. We're going to focus on a few of them right now. We'll start out with one of the most interesting for me in Canada, which is the advent of the 6-story structural wood building. Obviously, there's huge carbon sequestration with this. It's quicker to build than steel or concrete because it's all panelized. Once the panels are in place, it can be considered as a finished substrate. So you no longer need to decorate the walls, the floors, or the ceilings. It's complete when it's in place. That really speeds up the construction schedule. And of course, these surfaces are thermally broken. So you've got a good R factor and U factor when you're building a building like this out of wood. Some of the most beautiful buildings on the planet are timber frame. It's a historical technology dating back to the Middle Ages, where you can get these large open spans. Often today we're using big glass doors and windows to be able to frame views. It has mortise and tenon joinery in it, which is often used where you've got a pocket. The image on the left shows you a tenon being forced into those two holes are for pins. So you've got a pocket that receives the tenon, and then you pin it with two wooden dowels. And so you can either cut these timbers by a sawmill, or on the right you've got a 5-axis robotic Hundegger saw, German piece of technology that rotates the timber. You're able to cut those pockets out of it and do all the kind of complex joinery that a man would normally do in, a 20th the time, and very, very accurately. One of the other types of construction is engineered post and beam. And so instead of using expressly wood, you're using connectors that are often steel, and you're sticking them together with large screws and or specialized fittings that allow for these larger laminated timbers usually to be put into place, and you get these much larger free-span structures. This is a set of stairs that Frank Geary's office designed at the Art Gallery of Ontario. I put them in here because they're one of my favorite things in a home. It's where an architect and a designer really has a chance to show off. if you've got the budget. And Frank Gehry certainly knows how to spend it here. Wood's also a great complement for stairs, using steel as stringers. It really softens up the look when you add the wood to it. And of course, one of our favorite types of stairs these days is the floating steel wood stair, where it's kind of like, how does that thing even stand up? Building tree houses is something that as a child I used to do, and today people are spending millions of dollars doing it. This is a tree house in New Zealand, but it's become a worldwide phenomenon in urban places to build them in old growth trees in backyards. We go from art to engineering again. This is the world's largest free-span structure in wood. It's in Vancouver. It's known as the Richmond Oval, and it houses in this oval 2 Olympic-sized rinks, 4 gymnasiums, a swimming pool, and all kinds of other facilities. The free span is 100 meters. It's got 2.5 hectares of space underneath it. The amazing thing about it is all of these wood products that are in the ceiling were made off-site, brought to the site and connected up, and then put into place by huge cranes. The length of time was just incredible because everything was built off of site. And all of the mechanical and fire suppression systems are in those large beams, as well as the sound acoustics. So you've got all this open wood. The tremendous amount of surface area provides incredibly good acoustic balancing in it. If you've ever been in a large steel and concrete auditorium or structure, you know how disconcerting the sound bouncing around can be. Well, it's just like being in a home in this one. On the exterior side of things, residentially, we still in Canada love to use cedar shingles. And they can last for over 50 years on a roof and as long as 100 as siding. Texturally, it's beautiful. There's no maintenance required. It's stood up to hurricanes over the years, and it can be both modern, as in this building, or traditional. Either way, looks great. It's a sustainably used practice in Canada. Another interesting development in the last 15 years are the thermally modified woods. Kebony is one such wood. It's the leading type of wood in this category. It's carried here in the UAE by a company known as Chabros. And Kebony is a chemical infusion where you take bio-based plant chemicals and you put it into lesser value soft and hardwoods, thereby making it heavier, more dense, and stable. It has a 60-year life cycle on a horizontal substrate and a 30-year warranty. It's an incredible product. It's been in the marketplace for 16 years, and some of the nicest projects around the world now are built using Kebony. That's another spot in Norway. This is a beautiful restaurant in Oslo. Top 5 reasons to use Kebony are the 30-year warranty, the FSC certification that goes with it, the fact that it's the same price as tropical hardwood, it installs twice as fast as tropical hardwood, and there's absolutely no maintenance. This last image is one of my favorite with Kebony. That's a power plant in the middle of nowhere in Norway. Wish I could get the Canadian government to spend like that. Shosugiban. The literal Japanese translation for this traditional art form is burned cedar wood. So you take a blowtorch and you char the cedar wood. Once it's charred, bugs are no longer interested in it. Sun, wind, rain don't break the fiber down anymore. So it's a 100-year, no maintenance finish. Takes a bit of time to do it, but if you're a do-it-yourself type person, it's an excellent composite. On the inside of a home, there's a lot of different things that bring to mind the hand of a craftsman. And we're all looking to differentiate our homes and our projects to show the hand of a craftsman. So today's trends tend towards wide plank, hand-scraped flooring. It shows that traditional echo of craftsmanship. I'm showing here a couple of different types of flooring. You've got engineered on the left and solid sawn. The reason we like engineered is it's more stable, and it's got really the greatest good for the valuable woods, as what you can't use is plywood below it, which is of a lesser value. The image on your right shows you approximately 4 times as much wood. The one key factor with engineered woods is to make sure that you've got a heavy wear layer of at least 4 millimeters on the lamella, or the wear layer. Anything less than that, you'll only get a couple of sands out of it, a couple of refinishes out of it. So it's really critical that you spend the extra amount of money to get the 4 millimeter lamella. The question of whether you should use pre-finished or unfinished, I say it hinges on whether or not you can handle the micro-beveled edges on the pre-finished flooring. Usually with pre-finished, you can see on the left how each of the pieces that butt against one another have this micro-bevel. It's not a very attractive feature, I think. The image on the right shows you a flat landscape. I prefer my high-end projects to look like that. Of course, every piece of engineered wood that you install, the project is finished. When you're installing unfinished flooring, you still need to sand it, perhaps stain it, and then put top coats on it. This can add a lot of days to a finished project, and since the flooring goes down at the end of a project, nobody has any time for anything at the end of a project. Another trend in the last 10 or 15 years is natural live edge tables, or just natural live edge in different places. This is our black walnut live edge table. It has a Loxley base on it. The most popular species these days are black walnut, white oak, yellow birch, and spalted maple. Generally, tables have 1 to 3 pieces on them, and you can use slabs for all kinds of other sources as well, like coffee and end tables, headboards, bar and countertops, as well as for this floating stair treads and for shelves. Just by changing the base, you can make a different statement with the table. You remember that barn that we saw a little while ago? Well, the wood that came out of that barn was used on this very project in Toronto. If you look to the left of the fireplace, you'll see that there's some floating shelves there and a cabinet below it. And in the foreground, you've got a leather Chesterfield whose structural composition is made up of this gray barn board. We do some tables out of this as well. Of course, with the deep rivulets that are in this old barn board, it makes it difficult to wipe down a table. So for a coffee table, it's okay. For your dining room table, not so good, especially if you have children and they're spilling things on it. And then here I want to draw your attention on the floor. You can see the actual saw blade marks on the floor from when the mill cut those trees down 150 years ago, those giant circular mills. So when you get into using reclaimed wood, it becomes a real tongue twister. You kind of got to get your specs right. So if we were to specify this, what we'd call this is buzzsawn, skip planed, reclaimed hemlock, and then it's got 3 coats of satin finished polyurethane on top of that. Diffusing light is great for veneers. This light fixture takes into consideration maple and oak with a Japan red stain on the outside. We use it for countertops extensively, either solid quarter sawn, white oak or walnut. In this case, it's white oak. You can see on the right side there, it's got a knife, it's got 3 knives sticking out of it. And so that's the area in this small kitchen where you would prep your foods, and there's a little metal container known as a bain-marie fit into the countertop. You lift the lid off of it, chop, all the waste goes into the bain-marie. When it's full, it goes into your compost heap. Back to the soil. It's usually only 1 of 3 countertops that we use in a kitchen. This is the same project where we've used quarter sawn white oak and then maple and walnut for the chessboard. And then this image here is showing one of our walnut countertops, again, end grain. And you'll notice it kind of doesn't look exactly like walnut. That's because it's super saturated with mineral oil. So we use mineral oil, which is a natural, clear petroleum distillate. And what it does is it absorbs into the wood and it stops cheeses and liquids from sticking to the surfaces. So natural product along with natural wood. This is our Nona cutting board on the top side, which is what you're looking at here. That's for meats. It has a reveal to collect the juices when you're cutting them. And then you flip it over on the other side for your other products like vegetables and breads and things like that. Charcuterie platters, a great way to present food. We've torched the edge of this walnut piece. And so you'd serve meats and cheeses at a party, or you'd leave them on the table. People can help themselves. It really punches up the way that food looks. It's terrific in presentation. It's great for restaurant and hospitality. Traditional uses for wood include doors and windows. We never specify wood on the outside because of the maintenance issue related to it, but on the inside, nothing warms up a home better. Specification is the key. How do you get it right? Well, the short answer is you learn as much as you practically can. You see whether or not in your firm there's someone else who has more knowledge than you, or you make sure that your suppliers and their reputations are in keeping with yours. I'm going to offer you 7 tips on specifying wood now. The first tip is usage and performance. What do you want the wood to do? Some woods do better outside than others. So you need to know what kinds of woods work in that situation. How hard does the wood need to be? There are two tests, the Janka test and the Burnell test, to determine hardness. Do you need to use a solid or a veneer? Thicker wood costs more. Do you need that extra cost? Wider or narrower boards? If you've got wider boards, it moves more seasonally, and usually wider boards are more expensive. Aesthetic. What's the cut of the wood? Is it quarter sawn? Is it rift sawn? Is it plain sawn? These are all complicated questions if you've never heard the terms before, but essentially growth rings connotate the way that wood looks after it's cut. So when you cut perpendicular to the growth rings, you're going to get the most precious cuts, the rift and the quarter sawn. Plain sawn gives you more of the cathedral grain and the wavy look, and it's entirely up to you, but the most stable cut of all is the quarter or the rift sawn. Samples, a tool to align your expectations. Having real wood samples that are up to date help ensure that you and your clients are aligned. They can be placed on storyboards for presentations, and of course they can be kept in place so that by the end of the project you can use them as a control. Yes, it looks like what the sample was supposed to be. Availability, is it in stock or will it necessitate a custom order? Knowing whether it's in stock or it's a custom order is going to make the difference in timing and cost. Get this information early and get it in writing. Costing. What can the project budget support? I always specify what I believe to be the best wood for the project regardless of the cost, because material once installed has to work, and it is usually only part of the installed cost. Argue for the best wood for the job. Which finishing technique best suits the job? Of course, this question could be another tech talk, but essentially most wood projects require a coating because it'll get stained or marked up without it. Choose low or no VOC coatings because who wants off-gassing in their air? Choose something that you know that will be a natural product if you can. We produce a mineral oil and beeswax emulsion that we use on many of our cabinets and built-ins, and we always use this on our tables and our countertops and cutting boards. We call it a living finish because you have to maintain it. New mothers especially like this finish. Installation. Utilizing BIM to engineer workflow. On large projects, BIM makes sense, and even on our smaller projects and residential projects, we use it to help all of our trades forecast bottlenecks. It's really easy to see how a one-day pre-finished floor install turning into a 6-day finished on-site job creates move-in delays, loss of flow, and when you use a BIM chart, of course, your client gets to make the final choice. That's what keeps us in business most of the time. Thanks for your attention, and I hope it was of use.